Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler, joined as always by Ryan Schumpert and Ryan Sylvia on a little bit of a first day of school edition of the Press Pass. Now, not first day of school in terms of Tennessee classes, but in terms of, hey, fall camp is here. Tennessee hosted their in-house media day here on Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning, right on campus, things get rolling with fall camp here in Knoxville. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing today? How did you enjoy, your fifth media day under Josh Heupel, in-house at least?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was good.
It's
It's kind of become
media
the
days as always, I guess,
yeah, it's
But
become the standard.
to be fair, it did feel like one of, I guess, the more interesting media days. I know we just talked to Heupel at SEC Media Days kind of recently, so a lot of the big, Joey Aguilar, Nico Imaliava situation kind of got covered, but now all of a sudden the Boo Carter stuff comes up. I know we'll
Right.
probably start with that breaking news there, but it was still another kind of eventful offseason for Tennessee that couldn't get to media days without more drama unfolding around this program. So maybe the most, besides the first one, most anticipated media day yet.
Yeah, I think they're just having that set news that we knew we would. I don't even know if it's necessarily quite a resolution to the Boo Carter situation, but we would get an update. We would know one way or the other whether Boo Carter could have been a resolution that he was no longer on the team, or what it was that he is with the team and will play this season with the Vols, but obviously kind of uncertain of exactly what that'll look like with some of the stuff Heupel said. So between the quarterback competition, I feel like it was less notable stuff said about the quarterback competition, but between those two things, because we really, again, I guess Sylvia said it, we haven't had one of those, like a true quarterback competition
Right.
since Josh Heupel's first year either. So those two things, made for an interesting first day.
Yeah, it did. And it was certainly a packed house there on campus for this one. And again, things will kind of wind down as the season goes on and certainly as fall camp goes on. But here at the beginning, it was a packed house with a lot of people there to hear what Josh Heupel had to say. Also got to talk to offensive coordinator Joey Halsley and defense coordinator Tim Banks. And then we had about 10 players that were made available to the media at some point throughout the day as well. You can go and find all of those players and all of those interviews over on Rocky Top Insider's YouTube channel, as well as a couple of transcripts for Josh Heupel, Joey Aguilar, maybe get to some others as well over on RockyTopInsider.com. But like you guys had alluded to, let's just kind of get right into it. Josh Heupel started with this during his opening statement. He kind of did his thing where he welcomed everybody in, talked about his excitement for fall camp, and then said, hey, I know I'm going to be asked about this, so I'm just going to address it right here at the top. He did say that Boo Carter, defensive back, is still a member of the Tennessee football program. Now, he did say there are some things that he has to accomplish before sort of returning to the field for fall camp, and I guess for certainly games as far as that. But he did give a little bit of information about how there had been some discussions with the leadership council about what to do. But ultimately, Tennessee did decide to retain Boo Carter in the program, and that is sort of where we are at moving forward. Ryan, just sort of what was your initial reaction to this one? And then did this kind of play out the way that you would expect it? Not only what Josh Heupel had to say about it, but also an outcome, I guess, as well.
Yeah, I think what Josh Heupel had to say about it made sense. That he didn't go into a ton of detail about things. He didn't want to talk about it. He was not keen to give a lot of details or to talk more than just the very basics about what everything means. I think as far as what I expected to happen, I wouldn't say I really had any strong take until yesterday when I think it was Austin Price had to report that Boo was back in Knoxville. It felt like this was more likely. And then it was kind of to the point earlier I said at the beginning, whether we're going to have a resolution or not. When it looked like Boo was going to be back, you really weren't going to have a resolution because it's just if Boo's back, what does it look like going forward? Obviously, there's going to be consequences for Boo for missing as much time as he did this summer and skipping stuff that he was not allowed to skip. So, again, what does Heupel's thing mean? Is it punishment? Do we have a Coach Carter situation? 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 suicides till he can join the team? Could he potentially be suspended? All that stuff kind of still up in the air. And Heupel wasn't too keen to go into more detail on it. So, that part isn't shocking, but certainly leaves more questions than I think answers.
I think maybe the most interesting thing almost came outside of the press conference in Chris Lowe's report of ESPN a little bit after Heupel talked, where he insinuated that this one feels kind of player led more so than like, okay, is Heupel gonna lay down the hammer and do this or that, or is he just gonna welcome back with open arms? It seems a lot more like this one's going to be decided by that quote unquote leadership council that Heupel mentioned a few times. And Chris Lowe's tweet says, important to remember here that the leaders on Tennessee football made a pact that all players would be held accountable this year. They're the ones Carter has to win over to get back onto the field and 100% in good graces again. No more mulligans. So to me, that's almost the most interesting aspect of it, because Heupel's going to protect his guys and he's going to try to say as little as possible while giving as much information as he needs to, I guess, about the Boot Carter situation. But if it is the players that are leading the charge here, it is a good sign that, if you want to call it Josh Heupel's culture or brand or program that he's building, like the players that are here and that are still a part of it and showing up to the practices and stuff and not going over to UCLA and not in trouble right now for missing some stuff, that they are, being protective of it and kind of doing it on their own.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that to me stands out. Like I think if you're going to bring him back on the team, those guys needed to be good with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I look at it, and look, I'm usually of the opinion Boot Carter's I think a highly talented player. I'm usually of the opinion he kind of put up with some stuff for highly talented players, like Tennessee did for James Pierce last year. Like I think that's it. Typically, in the end, is more important. But and as I look at this Tennessee team, and I thought about the Boot Carter situation, that's kind of like, well, one, he's less proven than James Pierce was. James Pierce was an All SEC player 2 years ago. Boot Carter is highly talented, but he's not played at some elite level on the field. He was a good player, a nice player as a true freshman last year. So you have that aspect too, where I think it's different. Two, Tennessee's not going to win the national championship this year. Tennessee, it would be just a head over heels good season if they made the college football playoff. And if they do get there, I don't think they're very, they're built to make a deep run. So you look at what Tennessee does have going for them right now, and one of the main goals here of what's kind of become a transition season in a way is to don't let the floor fall off. Like this Tennessee team seems to have a high ceiling. You want to just keep things in a good spot, and not have what has been objectively a bad offseason for Tennessee, like spiral into a bad season and something that kind of turns the momentum of Josh Heupel's tenure. So from that perspective, I'd kind of looked at and was like, man, if all these guys on the team want him gone and think he can't be a part of the team, like what you kind of have going for you right now is the culture. The players are on the same side with the Nico situation. They liked how you handled that. If all your leaders are telling you need to kick this guy out, like, is it really worth bringing him back just because he is talented and he maybe, I don't really think so. Maybe Boot Carter accounts for one more win on the field. Probably not. I mean, maybe it's if the difference is 0.2 wins or something like that. To Sylvia, to your NCAA college football sims, if it's 8.85 wins for Tennessee, maybe it accounts for that 0.15 win or something like that. But with all that in mind, it felt like the players kind of needed Heupel kind of needed to follow his leadership council's guidance on this one. So the way it makes it sound like those players need to Boo to get back in good graces. He still has to do more work for that, but they're willing to him being back on the team. I think that's what's maybe most encouraging about the fact that it seems like Boo Carter will be on this Tennessee football team come September or August 30th when they face Syracuse.
Yeah, and Josh Heupel was asked during this press conference, hey, do you rely on your leadership council for all decisions like this? And he kind of said, no, I do for some, others I don't. Others we can kind of handle internally with the coaching staff. But it does kind of just shed light to how much he does use that resource of his and how much he does rely on what those players think, because ultimately, and what we know about this program, and certainly how we'll talk about it from an on-field perspective coming up a little bit later on this fall camp preview, there are a lot of guys who have been in this program for a good amount of years now. Now, whether they've gotten on the field or not is another story, but guys who understand what this program wants to be, and a lot of the ways what this program is. And so I think that being able to rely on that is a good move. And again, kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, we don't know what this is going to look like for Boo Carter and sort of his journey back onto the field and his journey back into a trusted and good graces spot with the team. As previously mentioned, Josh Heupel does like to keep some of those cards close to his chest on that. But I think that we'll hopefully get some more updates throughout the spring about what this all looks like. But it does seem like, hey, this is a situation that is recoverable, that people are going to try to, I don't know, just move past or get to a better spot than maybe where they were previously, and everything that sort of goes along with that. So, Ryan, I'm with you. Just going back to my initial question that I asked you at the beginning of this thing, no, Heupel's answer wasn't too surprising. And we did get, sort of the reports throughout the day, I should say. Chris Lowe, like you had mentioned, Sylvia, saying that Boo Carter was back in Knoxville. And we did hear from Josh Heupel that he is with the team, but not much more elaboration on sort of what he needs to do in order to get back in those good graces. Not much elaboration into what happened. We just know that, coming from the reports last week, that he might have missed some team activities. It sounds like the road to getting back, not only again where they need to be, but maybe in a better place than that. The train is on the tracks, at least going in the right direction. So we'll see how this thing plays out. But it was a fascinating day, and Josh Heupel certainly tackled this one right away during his press conference. I don't think he wanted to wait for those questions. He did get more questions after it. You'll be able to see it was a 20-minute press conference after all. But he wanted to attack this thing head on, just like he did with the quarterback battle at SEC Media Days, just like we've kind of known Josh Heupel to do so with sort of some controversial moments during his career. He doesn't want to shy away from these things, and he knew it was going to get talked about, and he handled things off the bat.
I think there's two things to note on this whole situation as well. One, I think it's going to get obvious comparisons to the whole Nico situation and why, why was it Nico is so quickly, I don't want to use the word dismissed, but pretty much dismissed from the team. Like, hey, Josh Heupel's like, we got to move on without him. Not going to be our quarterback this year, compared to a Boo Carter situation where now it is up to the leadership council and the team in the locker room. It feels like the line was very clearly crossed with Nico when it was that official spring practice that he missed on Friday, right ahead of that spring game. When compared to Boo Carter, it's not in that official string of practices. So I feel like that is worth noting. Heupel said that they are mandatory expected team activity type of deals, but it is slightly different. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why you do see a bit of a different reaction compared to the two absences. And the other thing is, if you were expecting Boo Carter to be someone that played on both sides of the ball this year, now all of a sudden it looks like that could be in jeopardy just because of the way this offseason started to unfold after that spring period where Heupel said, going to take things slow because he's still got to work his way back to the field. And we're just about a month away from the season actually getting underway. So I'm not too confident right now that you see too much of Boo Carter on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe by the end of the year, he could get into that boat. But right now, just kind of reading on what Heupel was saying about things, it feels like that might be a bit of an uphill battle to get him kind of consistently on that side of things, if that was even truly a plan to get him consistently over there in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like it's, I think that's the, I don't know, irony, this thing that makes you roll your eyes. Like the Boo Carter wants to play offense and then just no-show stuff. Like, we considered getting in the playbook, getting in the film room, learning the offense. Like, maybe that'll help you get on the field more. Which was obviously used,
especially when you got a lot of other guys in the wide receiver room who are trying to, step up and kind of carve out their own path as well. They're probably putting in a lot of work.
For sure. And then, Sylvia, to your comparison to Nico, like the two things I would say, one, I think it's also different for it to be your quarterback as opposed to a defensive back. And then two, the Nico thing was mutual. Tennessee moved on, but Nico was moving on. Nico was leaving. So it's, that was good PR from Josh Heupel. More than anything. Like, okay, you could just, we would take Nico back. Well, Nico wasn't coming back. So, that's, you got to be front facing with that stuff. Boo can go play at ETSU if he wants, and go play for Tennessee Tech. He's not playing Power 5 football this season if he doesn't stay at Tennessee. So it just made more sense, I think, for all parties involved to try to have a reunion. And then the fact that, I don't think it has to, it's not nearly as detrimental to your team, given the fact that Boo's not expected to be some main leader. But it'll be interesting to see what it looks like. And I think, I'm ripping on Boo a little bit for some of this stuff. Like, I think it will speak highly to him if he, apologizes to his teammates, does everything that it takes to get back on the field, and, does it with a good attitude.
Yeah, and maybe even being a little bit optimistic, but maybe you can sort of overcome some of those hurdles. And then Sylvia, it goes back to your point of, okay, well then if you do have him back in the fold and back in the system, and you do feel like he is committed to what you want to do and he's committed to his teammates especially, then maybe that opens up some different avenues down the road, and potentially that being a two-way spot on the offense. But this is a really good player, and it is a guy who was just wanted. Tennessee didn't have a lot of players voted into the All SEC Media preseason team, but he was one of those three. I think they were all on the defensive side. I think it was him and McCoy and Arion Carter. Maybe it was that last one, but it's a guy who did project to be a big part of what Tennessee wanted to do. And again, we don't know how this thing is going to unfold, but if you want to take an optimistic route, then maybe this is sort of the first step into getting there, and then seeing how things unfold from there. But we don't know what that's going to look like yet. I guess maybe we'll get some more answers throughout fall camp, but sort of just like this was a pretty definitive point where we get some information. Maybe we'll have one of those points coming up soon with the regular season as it draws closer here at the end of August and moving into that week 1 game against Syracuse.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the ship certainly hasn't sailed on Boo Carter, right? Like he could still work his way back and get into good graces. And I think it was a good point. Like it would say a lot about him if he is able to just kind of say, hey, my bad, let's get this thing back on track. So I think there's still got to be some optimism that things get ironed out. And whether it's this year, whether it's week 1, week 12, or whether it's next year or not at all, like there still is a chance that he could work his way into being a two-way guy. But we saw what that looked like for D Williams, which that was kind of a midseason switch back in 23 that they wanted to try to just, hey, the offense isn't performing that well. Just get him the ball and see what he can do because he was so dynamic in the return game. But you saw how tough it is. It's not as easy as, it may seem to just start getting reps on offense. So I'm curious to see what that would realistically look like if it even happens at all this year, considering the time he's missed and the time he might still have to miss, because it definitely feels like we're not going to go out there on the practice field tomorrow, Wednesday morning, and see Boo Carter out there again, full activities in with the team.
Yeah, I think that's the question that, what is he doing at practice? Which obviously it's a 2-part question. What is he doing at practice when we see, and then what's he actually doing?
Yes.
Once they get into the real stuff. But I'll be curious to see, and certainly be at least telling of what kind of like a starting point is as he tries to work back into good graces.
You know what was interesting? I was thinking about on my way home from UT Media Day today was, if you had asked me back in like early June, sometime anywhere around then, sort of any time after mid-April when Joey Aguilar joined the team, if there was anything that could have made it so where it wasn't the quarterback battle being sort of the main discussion point coming out of UT Media Days. Now, it would have been hard-pressed to think of anything that could have happened. It'd been like, no, this is a quarterback battle, especially one under Josh Heupel, especially one that was unexpected. But then here we are, sitting here leading off things with Boo Carter. And obviously, I think rightfully so, but it's just funny to sit here and sort of obviously as the transparency of this sport unfolds and as these new stories come into light, it is interesting just how things are shaken out and how things are covered. Obviously, you can go and find more about that over on RockyTopInsider.com. But as previously mentioned, there is a quarterback battle about to unfold. In less than 24 hours out on the UT campus. And that is with the trio of players that is transfer quarterback Joey Aguilar, redshirt freshman Jake Merklinger, and obviously true freshman George McIntyre. Got to hear from all 3 quarterbacks today, as well as their 2 coaches with Joey Halsley and Josh Heupel. And man, it sounds like this is going to be a true competition, which I don't think is anything that is new or anything that we did not expect. But there were a couple of little points that I think that people would talk about during all of this that were interesting. Obviously, one of them being, hey, how do you sort of balance that weight of the camaraderie and the kumbaya spirit within the quarterback room between also going out there and saying as a player, hey, I want to do whatever it takes to go win this battle. I want to go, go a little bit harder, go a little bit extra in order to get my name on this spot. I think 3 of us are pretty much down to the fact that it's either going to be Joey Aguilar or Jake Merklinger. But just open question, was there anything about today that sort of maybe surprised you or led you in one particular direction to the other about this quarterback battle? Or was it more so just sort of, hey, these are the guys who are going to be in it. There's a lot of conversation that we would maybe expect to hear from a a quarterback room and a good culture and a good environment, not too much trash talk between each other, but a healthy level of competition. Was there anything that was surprising to either of you with what we heard, whether it be from a coach or a player today?
I don't think a ton, especially with the coaches. I mean, it was funny. I think Halsey's first question that he got asked was, are you worried about Aguilar's turnover issues at Appalachian State? Which obviously he's not going to say that he is, but that was kind of to the point. I think the biggest question with Aguilar is he comes to Tennessee, and then I guess the one thing I would just say is interesting. Aguilar has a lot more outgoing personality, and Sylvia, you sat there and during
Mhm.
his entire media availability, and I just kind of popped in. So it was good to listen to him talk a little bit and just get familiar with him, since obviously it was his first press conference or media availability at Tennessee. But Lance Hurd said that he talked a lot about like Jake Merklinger being a really natural leader. And not that he said anything bad about Joey Aguilar's leadership, but it certainly wasn't like in the same breath. And it's early; he hasn't been on the team this long. But I just thought that was interesting because Aguilar has such an outgoing personality that I would think leadership would come pretty natural
Sure.
to him. And Merklinger is a little bit more of a quiet guy, not to the extent that Nico was quiet, but he's not super outgoing in his conversations with us. So certainly it's still new for Aguilar. He's probably spent a lot more time with the receivers during the summer, doing 7-on-7 stuff, routes on air. So he's new. It doesn't mean that he won't be that as he gets a little bit more acquainted with his teammates and into the full go of fall practice. But that was something that I at least made note of.
I thought it was the way I look at it is when Nico left, I think the biggest, you know, positive if you did go the direction of Jake Merklinger, what was obviously, of course, he was a highly rated recruit, four-star guy. I think he was, top 250 type of recruit out of Georgia, but it was that he's been at UT and the team had someone to rally around, like in the fan base too. You saw when he came out for the orange and white game directly after all that Nico news broke, there was a big reaction. And so that felt like a positive for the case of Jake Merklinger is you could rally around him. Now, I think Joey Aguilar has done a good job of coming in and being quick to integrate himself within the culture and the team and things like that. And it doesn't feel like he's still a stranger to anyone or anything like that. But it is interesting when you look at Jake Merklinger's offseason since the spring, where he's down working with the Mike Matthews and the Braylon Staleys. And I think it might have been Amari Jefferson was the other one, if I remember right. While you hear Joey Aguilar talk, and it's a lot of connecting with someone like Miles Kitselman. So I don't know if maybe it's, Joey Aguilar's had an easier job, connecting with some of the older experienced guys like a Miles Kitselman, while Jake Merklinger, since he was in the same class as most of those guys or all those guys I just named, and then Lance Hurd, he's entering his junior year, but his second in the program, so came in as a newcomer last year at the same time as Jake Merklinger. I'm curious if that is any part of it or almost just a coincidence. But to me, sitting watching Joey Aguilar, meet with the media that whole time, it did kind of start to make me feel like it's his job to lose in a way. Like I think they'll get the first team reps will be spread across those three guys at least to start, and then maybe it'll get kind of narrowed down if it does end up being that two-man race between Merklinger and Aguilar, like everyone's starting to kind of lean to, just because it's true freshman George McIntyre. That'd be a really tough ask for him to go and win that job. But to me, as we sit here right now, before watching Joey Aguilar throw a single pass at practice, before they actually hit the field tomorrow, it just feels like if you had to bet on a guy, he's going to be the starter for that Syracuse game. It feels like that would have to change right now for me to switch my opinion. I'm decently confident that he'll be able to win that job.
Yeah, Ryan Shumpert, you put out earlier today sort of projecting Tennessee football's depth chart as it stands here at the end of July heading into fall camp. You do have Joey Aguilar as your number one quarterback. Now, obviously, that's a prediction without seeing anything on the field and having a little bit more information. So if it's not there's plenty of grace there. But what led you to sort of believing that route as well? Was it the experience factor? Was it something else that sort of has you maybe agreeing with what Sylvia's talking about there, where that it might be his job to lose here at the beginning of fall camp, though we're on the outside sort of looking into this situation?
Yeah, I think it's that. It's the experience. I think ceiling's probably higher, at least in this ceiling, than Jake Merklinger's is. I think it's one of those things where if all goes according to plan, he's the starter. I also think, and I don't know how firmly entrenched I would be in this take, but like I do think it would be easier if to start Aguilar and then go to Merklinger if he
Mhm.
struggles, as opposed to start Merklinger and then go to Aguilar. I don't know how fully entrenched I would be in that take, but I do kind of feel like that's the
I
case.
agree with that because if you start Merklinger and then he gets benched halfway through the year, that feels like a transfer. That feels like you can't come back from that. Where if it is flipped, and even if Merklinger doesn't hold on to that job for the second half, like let's say it's Aguilar for the first half, Merklinger for a couple games, then you go back to Aguilar, like you could still salvage things maybe there if you did like what you got from Merklinger. So I think there's something to that.
Yeah, that's kind of the thought process that I was in. And also like to the standpoint of some of those guys, it feels like are maybe Merklinger guys, and maybe that's not true. Maybe it's truly everybody neutral. Like I feel like a little bit of like the Jalen Milrow thing 2 years ago at Alabama when they went to Ty Simpson against South Florida, and it kind of seemed like the team revolted against that decision, and they played horrific in that game and went back to Milrow. Like I feel like you'd get maybe a little bit of that with Merck. Maybe I'm not right about that, but that's kind of the thought process there. So, yeah, I just think it's the experience. It's the best case scenario. I kind of continue to think Merklinger is maybe the better fit for his team, but I think Aguilar will get the first crack at it. And yeah, to me, the question is more like, do we truly have a named starter by game one, or do they try to alternate reps? Because I'm just not sure. Either way, no matter who wins the job, I'm just not sure how big of a difference there's truly going to be between these guys that we're going to learn about in what's truly 3 weeks before they begin game prep for Syracuse.
Yeah, and one thing that Joey Halsley did talk about today was he was asked, obviously, is there a timetable for what you would like to have that quarterback battle done? And as you would sort of expect him to say, he said, yeah, we would like to have it sooner rather than later so you can start tailoring the offense about what, around the guy that it's going to be. So the teammates can start sort of getting acclimated to who's going to be that leading signal caller in the pocket. But there's also so many things that go into it. And I do think that it's a twofold situation, not only, and Sylvie, this was something that you and I talked about a lot coming out of SEC Media Days, is not only do you have the on-field production and what they can do with the ball in their hands and working with those receivers, but it's also going to be the team camaraderie aspect of it and being able to be that leader. That was something that Miles Kitselman was pretty open and honest about during an interview with The Zone during those media days. He was saying, look, there were times last year when we'd come off the field after a 3-and-out and then another 3-and-out. And there just wasn't a lot of vocal leadership on that team. And I do think that was sort of, pointing out Nico Iamaleava's struggles in that sense. But I think that was also a rallying point for the players who did stay to say, hey, this is something that we really need going into the 2025 season. Although Joey Aguilar wasn't there, I'm sure that message has been relayed. I'm sure that's gone across. And so that would also lead me to believe that, hey, a guy who's had 2 seasons of starting experience, even though it's at a different level, maybe he's sort of more comfortable with that right off the bat. But then, Shumpert, to your point a second ago, you hear a guy like Lance Hurd who's going to be that key figure on the offensive line, and he's talking about sort of praising Jake Merklinger for his vocal ability. I think that's a good sign for this quarterback competition, and you want those good signs, right? You want guys to be good at not necessarily good at the same things and obviously bad at the others. That would be the opposite into that. But you want them to be in competition in multiple stages of the game, right? Whether it be 2 guys who can lead the offense well vocally, 2 guys who can throw the ball well down the field and get to the receivers and actually play the scheme of the offense well. I think that's all good things for the quarterback competition. Gives these coaches a little bit something extra to think about. And then maybe you're right. Then maybe you do start with a guy in week 1, but you want to kind of solidify your decision a couple weeks later. Maybe that sort of helps give you a little bit of leeway to just to figure things out on the fly if you need to do so. I like what Joey Aguilar brings to the table with just this gunslinger mentality. He's not afraid to rip the ball down the field. He's not afraid to try to contest tight windows and we've seen some of that throughout his highlight tapes. A good friend of our program, Tyler Wombles, actually has a great write-up on breaking down some of what Joey Aguilar's game was at App State. But then you go to the Jake Merklinger side of it, and some of it's less talked about because some of it we just don't know about. I think he had, 48 yards during his true freshman season. So we don't know what he looks like in that kind of, environment. So I think there's a lot of interesting questions to be answered. Some of them we will be able to see with our own eyes, but some of those will be behind closed doors at fall camp practices. But there are a lot of things out on the table for who is eventually going to go and capture this role. And I think it's got to be a guy to earn that and to go out there and grab it. But Joey Halzle said, hey, look, but we're not in a rush necessarily because we want some guy to go earn it. We just don't want to pick a guy for the sake of picking a guy. We want somebody to go out there and say, hey, this job is mine. This is exactly why. And I'm going to do that. Now, some of it's not just going to be, I guess, the guy who can make the least mistakes, but the guy who can sort of prove that they can be aggressive in this offense. Joey Halzle talked about that today, is that, Sylvia, what did he say? Like the biggest focus of the offseason has been trying to get those explosive plays back. Which quarterback can give you the best
That was
chance
the
to do
most
that?
notable thing I thought was said today.
I think that's got to be, maybe the biggest, factor in who can win this quarterback battle is who's not going to be afraid to go out there and give them big plays. Now, Joey Aguilar with the turnover things, maybe that comes into play, but someone's got to come out and win this battle and be able to say, hey, I'm going to turn the ball loose downfield. I'm going to attack down the field. I'm going to attack that secondary, and we're going to try to get those explosive plays back in Knoxville.
Yeah, I think the way Halsey talked about it that's been against these soft kind of prevent defenses, these 3-3-5 defenses we've seen give Tennessee issues the last couple seasons. Missouri did it in 23, really shut them down in the Arkansas game last year. How do you create explosive plays? And, not that you'd expect that to be the case. You'd expect that to be one of the main offseason priorities for the coaching staff, but to hear Halsey put it in the terms that he did, I thought was interesting, and certainly notable, because that's before Nico, before all this stuff that's kind of become a circus of an offseason for Tennessee. I think that was one of the big talking points of how does Tennessee's offense get back to being explosive like it was in 21 and 22, because it wasn't that in 23 or 24.
He also noted it was like, hey, no, not taking anything away from Dylan Sampson, but like that's part of the reason Dylan Sampson was able to have the year he did, is because when they're dropping like 8 guys back at times and they're just saying, hey, you're not going to beat us with the long ball. That was when Dylan Sampson in Tennessee just said, all right, well, just going to run for 70 yards down the field and score a touchdown. And they went away from it at times. There were some issues getting that going at times with fumbles, this and that. But for the most part, that was a very consistent offense when they did turn to it. But you are going to need to have the long balls as part of it. Like that was a staple of those first 2 seasons for Tennessee. It was a big reason they just throttled LSU out the gates when Hooker was able to hit Hyde. Obviously, the Alabama game. You look to a bunch of those 22 games where they were able to connect on some of those deep balls. I don't know how you manufacture that if teams are just going to settle on dropping so many guys back and rushing 3 and saying do whatever, but they're going to have to figure it out. And to have a quarterback controversy or I keep saying controversy, but a quarterback battle, I guess more so, as we're in fall camp, that definitely doesn't make things easier. But at the same time, Joey Aguilar, I think if you're concerned about his turnovers, that's fair to a certain extent. Like he turned the ball over a lot at App State, particularly last season. He said he's still going to throw the ball. Like he's not going to shy away from it. He doesn't want to get timid because of those turnovers. But at the same time, he's taking a step back and kind of looking at things from the perspective of, if the defense is going to give me 8 yards on a check down, I'm just going to take it. I'm not going to force something downfield because there's a chance I can make a big play if they're just going to let us move the chains here and keep this offense rolling. So if he can really kind of dive into that mindset and they can kind of protect him in some ways within the system that he wasn't protected at App State, I don't think that the turnover number should be too big of an issue. But the arm talent is there. If you are able to manufacture some deep balls, I think Joey Aguilar's got a good enough arm to make that work.
When you talk about those explosive plays, and yes, the quarterback is going to be a huge part of it, whether it be Jake Merkling or whether it be Joey Aguilar, but you also need your receivers to go out there and be able to make those plays as well. Maybe there's situations where, Tennessee needs to attack different spots of the field and just sort of prove to defenses that they can get those things back. Maybe defenses play Tennessee a little bit differently this year, just with I don't want to say an unproven quarterback, but unproven in this system type of quarterback. Maybe they go out there and do something differently, but you need those receivers to step up and make plays as well. And I think that for me is the biggest question about this offense moving forward, aside from who's going to be throwing the ball. And yes, you could talk about the offensive line, and I wouldn't blame you there if you picked that with only one returning starter there. And so much of what this team wants to do revolves around getting some protection, or at least getting some movement up front with the running game. But when you talk about Tennessee's receivers, it's Chris Brazzell coming back as a returning starter. But other than that, it's guys who didn't get a chance to see the field a lot last year, and young guys who have an understanding of what this offense wants to do and what this system wants to do. I know there's a lot of excitement about Mike Matthews, and for good reason. Braylon Staley as well. Amari Jefferson, a guy who Tennessee brought in through the offseason. But, what can these receivers do to make the quarterback's job a little bit easier? I think that's the next immediate question after just, okay, well, who wins the quarterback battle? But then also, what can these receivers do to then make them a successful quarterback? To me, I think that's one of the biggest questions about this offense heading into the season.
I think you mentioned the receivers. To me, this feels like a year for the second season in a row, but maybe even to a higher extent, that there's going to be a lot of 12 personnel for Tennessee. You don't have depth in the slot. Braylon Staley is really good, like he's really talented, but he doesn't have much experience. So he almost feels like a backup slot receiver. Like that would be where you would probably be the most comfortable putting him in his redshirt freshman season, but he's the best slot receiver you have on the roster. And Amari Jefferson probably isn't going to be 100% ready to get a lot of snaps this year. So I think the way you cover that up is you look to Ethan Davis a lot. You look to some of those young freshman tight ends. And if you can get Miles Kitselman and Ethan Davis rolling at the same time and get both those guys on the field flanked by Mike Matthews and Chris Brazzell, I think that can cover up a lot of those issues, particularly for a quarterback where he is new to the system. It's going to be bullets flying everywhere at first, as Halsley always likes to say. The bullets start flying. And for quarterbacks you see in the NFL all the time that aren't 100% comfortable at first, the tight end can really become a security blanket. So to get two of them on the field, I think could serve both of those purposes of getting a big body, a big target for whoever wins that quarterback job to get the ball to, but also it could help you kind of manage that depth chart a little bit more because you are all of a sudden pretty deep at tight end between Kitselman, Ethan Davis, Jack Van Dorselaer, and Deshaun Brame are both in their true freshman season. But you also have Cole Harrison, who I think was a 4-star when he was recruited as well. So you got 5 guys that realistically, to a certain extent, you should feel relatively confident to play. And I think that could be part of the key to getting the pass game going in a weird way.
Yeah, I believe Harrison was a 3-star, but no, I agree. I think the question almost becomes with those guys, like how advanced can they be, or like how far along besides Kitselman can they be in the run game as run blockers?
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously Ethan Davis, that's been a knock on him, and then I think that's just always with young tight ends the concern early on. Most of those guys are just kind of receivers for the most part in high school. So I think that's the aspect, but certainly it goes back to something I think Tim Banks said today about the inside linebacker room, where they're young, and in that way they maybe don't have as much depth, but they're from just the talent in that room. They have more talented depth than they've had. I think that's kind of the same case with the tight end room.
I think that's fair.
No doubt about it.
I think too, when you look at the run block, you're absolutely correct, especially for Ethan Davis. Like he still feels in a lot of ways just like a big wide receiver. If you're looking at those 12 personnel looks, you almost can just play him as a slot though. And then it does take some of that blocking off his plate. So I think that could also work in that way. It just feels like, Josh Heupel never really used 12 personnel in his first 3 seasons at Tennessee. Last year, starting in that NC State game, which kind of blindsided NC State and was a big reason they just ran away with that game.
Right.
They relied on it to a pretty decent extent with Holden Stays and Miles Kitselman.
Yeah.
It feels like that's going to take another step in that direction. I don't know if that's a long-term thing for Josh Heupel, but if you just look at the depth chart, it just feels like a natural solution if you are confident enough in some of those guys.
Yeah, I think so for sure. It's kind of the same reasons I like Jake Merklinger. Just to run the ball, take care of the football, don't make mistakes, lean on your defense to win games. I think the 12 personnel stuff kind of leans right into that.
It's just the safe option, I guess. Like if you do that, you're probably not going to lose 5 games. You might not win 10, but you're probably still going to sit at around 8-4, maybe try to get up to 9-3. But
I think it's one of those things where some of the bigger games from schedule, you probably see it less because they have to be a little bit more aggressive. But when you're playing the Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky's of the world, like Syracuse's, especially game 1, I think you can kind of just play conservatively and maybe not win in the most sexy style, similar to last year, but you're just going to be more talented and you can wear down those teams and win.
I think that's fair. Maybe lower the ceiling a little bit, but significantly raise the floor if you start turning the ball over and start spotting other teams' points and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I think this quarterback battle is going to be so interesting because I do think it gives you an idea of maybe how Tennessee views this offense being successful, and whether successful can be different things. It can be just sort of doing your job for what you need to do. It can do it. It can be about, sort of hanging as many points as you can out there on the field, trying to score quickly and trying to score tempo again. I think there's different ways to do it, but I think this quarterback battle will tell us a little bit about just how Tennessee sees this offense being successful in not necessarily in comparison, but hand in hand with what we think this defense is going to be. And I think a lot of us do have high hopes for what this defense is going to be. Obviously, came off of a really good year last year with a lot of good pieces, and some of those pieces are returning. I think the big thing is you look at Jermon McCoy, who's still recovering from that ACL injury that was suffered in July. I think that Jermon McCoy is one of the best cornerbacks in the nation. He can take this offense from being really good to being elite. He is projected as a first-round draft pick, but we still don't know sort of what his timetable is going to look like. And just like SEC Media Days, Josh Heupel wasn't committal to any sort of timeline of recovery, timeline of getting back on the field, timeline of seeing actual gameplay for Jermon McCoy. But I think that is certainly a priority for everybody inside that building, is to not only get him back, but also to do it the right way. I think he's the first thing you talk about with this defense. But, Shumpert, who else are you looking at this defense? Maybe it'd be a position group, maybe it'd be a player that we can sort of keep our eyes out here during fall camp.
Yeah, to stick to Jermon for just a second.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. That maybe this is just me. Maybe this is just the skeptic in me. That didn't seem like a overly positive update from Josh Heupel today.
It sounded less positive than he did during media day. Sylvie, would you agree with that?
I think that's fair. Like during media days, it was like, hey, he's doing well. He's moving well. We'll see where we're at when we get back to campus and go from there. And today it was like, it might be Colton Hood time for a little bit here.
And again, maybe that's SEC media days where everything is just sort of, pompous and bombastic and overly the top, over the top optimistic. But I did kind of get that sense, I did kind of get that vibe earlier as well. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, this is the same Josh Heupel who told us Cedric Tillman was questionable for like 6 weeks when he'd had ankle surgery and he wasn't going to play. Like, I very much expected of like, he's getting close. Like, we're not exactly sure when he'll be back, but we expect him to be out on the practice field. I don't have any expectations of seeing him doing much of anything on the practice field tomorrow when we get out there. So I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but back to your original question, I think,
Well, here, I'll pause you right there. Just for people who haven't gotten a chance to see the video or see the transcript real quick. Here's what Josh Heupel said about it, just super quick. No timetable on him. There are benchmark things that he's got to accomplish within our training room to move on to the next phase of it. He's handled it really well from the beginning, just his mindset and how he's approached every single day. He's done a really good job throughout the course of the summer. Periodically, you see his drills, movement, explosive type drills that he's doing change based on his rehab protocol. He's handled it extremely well. As we go through training camp, there'll be a progression. How his body responds to some of those things will kind of dictate the time period of when he's available for this. So again, like you said, non-committal, but certainly acknowledging that there are steps to take on this road to getting back on the field. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think from just like a competition standpoint, safety, besides Andre Turrentine, is a curious one. I think, kind of two things. It's very much a Dries Farouk, Caleb Beasley battle. I think, Farouk flashed at times last year. Tim Banks, was positive about him today.
Seemed high on him.
Yeah, for sure. And then I think with Beasley, and Banks talked about him as a guy that's in a cross train at Star. Like with Boo Carter's situation kind of in flux and Jermon McCoy's kind of in flux, like it feels like Beasley maybe is one of their better options at the star spot for the start of the season if they are down some guys, because I think they very much might need both Colton Hood and Jalen McMurray at corner to start the year alongside Ricky Gibson. So I think just that specifically the battle at safety, but even kind of broadening it out is some of the uncertainty with the more big name players in the secondary. How do all the puzzle pieces fit will be something I'm interested by.
For me, I look up front on the defensive end again, and that's been such a consistent thing for Tennessee. I mean, you even look to those 21 and 22 teams, which were far from good on the defensive end. But if you had to pick a spot that they were the best, it was probably Matthew Butler playing 90 snaps a game
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it starts there again. And I asked Jackson Moy today too about like our defensive line was really good last year. Are you confident that they're going to be good again? You don't expect him to say no, we're going to be worse or anything like that. But he was almost like, dude, like yeah, we're going to be really good again. I'm not worried about it. So I think that's a good sign that there is some confidence there. And then got some insight too from Ricky Gibson. Asked him about how much easier does it make your life when the defensive line is playing at a high level, when you're dropping back into coverage, and instead of having to stay on a guy's hip for 10 seconds, you have to stay back there for about 2 until the quarterback has to make a decision. And he pretty much laughed about it too and was like, yeah, I mean, it makes an unbelievable difference. So for a secondary that has some of those question marks, that is it going to be Idris Farouk? Is it going to be this or that? Is Jermod McCoy going to be ready? Is Colton Hood going to be able to pick things up as a spring transfer? If that defensive line can kind of, fill in the blanks from the defensive tackles in the Omar Norman lots and Amari Thomas and Elijah Simmons that left, and the big time Leo and James Pierce, if they can fill in those gaps and be a really productive group again, which they have the tools to do, it seems like, I think that could kind of ensure that some of those secondary issues get covered up a little bit, and you're probably feeling better about this defense as a whole, even if there is no Boo Carter or even if there is no Jermod McCoy or some of these stars that you expected.
Yeah, I think
definitely. Oh yeah, go ahead. Maybe we lost
got
him
me
for a
now?
sec. Oh, I
Yeah,
got
no,
you now.
it was-
Okay, go ahead.
it was
Finish your thought.
lagging.
Finish your thought.
I'm gonna say I think another battle. Am I lagging again?
got you back again.
Yeah,
Okay.
go try it again. We'll see if it works.
Yeah, I think edge rusher besides Josh Josephs is the other position battle. I'm curious. Like,
I'm just gonna bring that one up. Good
obviously
call.
not in those specific first downs. I think we know Josh Josephs the leader in that group, but in some of those third down packages, is it Jordan Ross? Is it Caleb Herring? Like, those guys are talented. They were big recruits, but very, very unproven at this level. So who emerges there, and just, can Josh Josephs take another step? Tim Banks talked about it today. It's kind of what we've all known. He was great last season against the run, but he kind of left out the part where he was pretty average rushing the passer. Tennessee needs him or one of those guys to be really good rushing the passer. To again, makes life easier on the secondary if you can go out there and bring 4 guys and get home. It makes your defense a whole lot better. So that's one area that I'm really looking for.
Yeah, I totally agree with that one. I just think that, man, it gives Tennessee so much more freedom and just continues to bolster a defensive line that we already think is going to be pretty good and does have a lot of veteran pieces. If you can bring in some of that versatility with those other guys. And I think it's going to be one of those things where we find out pretty quickly, which one of those guys, especially behind Joseph's, which one of those guys can sort of step up and emerge early into the year, who can kind of solidify themselves as a go-to guy who is forcing the coaching staff to put him on the field and to sort of keep him on the field. I think that you've seen good things from those other guys, and you know that they were highly touted prospects, but we haven't seen it on a consistent basis. And a lot of that was just because Tennessee's, last year had 2 really good guys in Pierce and Josephs. But which one of those guys can take that next step up and sort of continue this I don't know, just this bevy of good edge rushers that Tennessee has had over the last couple of years. That's been a calling card of that defense, and a place where Tennessee has hung their hat on their identity, has been able to get there. Now, I know that the sack numbers have gone down a little bit, but you've seen other things rise. And again, just looking at the edge rusher in specific, Tennessee has put together some good pieces on the field, the last 2 being Byron Young and James Pierce Jr. and what they've been able to do. So can Tennessee continue to show a little bit of depth there? Who can sort of step up behind Joshua Josephs? I think that's going to be a big thing. Just to quickly hit on the secondary part of things, I think that Colton Hood, we've mentioned his name a couple of times, but he's going to be one of those pieces that I think people should keep their eye on. Whether how much information we see about him or hear about him throughout the fall, if he can get things going, and somebody mentioned it a second ago, he was a post-spring camp transfer, so a little bit less time to get acclimated to things. But if he can get up to speed and not to say that he can't or give any reason for doubt why he can't, but just, if he can't, play in a hypothetical world here, I think he's a really versatile guy that can give Tennessee some different looks in different kind of ways, whether that's with a cornerback position, whether that's bumping out to a star position, or something in between. I think that if he can get things up to speed, he's going to be an intriguing piece to see if he can sort of step into those roles as well. So I think that, and I think with the linebackers, I think you're pretty set there. I think those two starting guys with Jeremiah Telander and Arion Carter, not the young guys anymore, not the freshman tandem, not even the sophomore tandem anymore, but they're those older guys in the room now. There's no Keenan Peely. There's no some of those other guys who have been there for a while. It's those two guys. And then behind him is Edwin Spillman, who I think the three of us are really high on with his potential and what he can potentially bring to the table. So I do look at the middle of Tennessee's defense as potentially being a strength of the team and a strength in numbers when you're just talking about a unit in total. But I think some of those other position groups might have a little bit more interest when it comes to fall camp, whether it be the position battle or just sort of how are things going to shake out heading into the season.
Real quick, who do you guys have on the defensive side right now that's kind of the breakout star? Like, there's a lot of talk about Josh Josephs, Jermod McCoy, Arian Carr. Who's the guy right now that we're not talking about enough?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because for me, it's Tyree West. I think Tyree West is going to have a monster season at defensive end.
I think that's a good one. And as we go into the same vein where it's kind of like, who would it be best for Tennessee to be? Davian Hobbs was the name that came to mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Like they're definitely more thin at defensive tackle than they've been.
Yeah,
and their strength has very much been just being able to roll out so many dudes there. Like they've had good players, but I don't think any true difference makers. I think Hobbs would be that, or Hobbs being that, I think would be really big. And I think that's kind of in the same mold of Tyree West, of just really just someone other than Josh Josephs, like emerging as a legit all SEC type guy in the defensive line. Because I think you feel really good about Joseph's ceiling being high.
You're on the money there with the interior, though. Like there is not a lack of depth, but compared to what they had last year, they didn't get as many proven bodies for the interior. Like they're going to have to ask David Hobbs, who was kind of in that third rotation, that third tier of defensive tackles.
David Moy, we're the third string guys, and those are going to be two of the top three now.
Yeah, and you're going to have to get kind of piece together guys like almost like a Nathan Robinson and things like that. They just haven't played a lot of football. So yes,
Josh Snell, the transfer they added,
Josh Snell, who Grand Valley State, Jamal Wallace, second year JUCO. Like some of those guys you're gonna have to figure out at least one of those guys are gonna have to play. So I do 100% agree. If you had to pick a breakout star, David Hobbs is a great choice.
I think another one. He's less under the radar than either of those two guys, but I could see Ricky Gibson having a really good year. Like I thought he got.
I thought about that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he got a lot better over the course of last season, and now there's going to be a lot riding on him now, especially if McCoy is not ready to go for the jump of the season. So he's one that he does get overlooked in that room because of Boo Carter, because of Jermod McCoy. That I could see him. I don't know if it's necessarily be a breakout year, but a guy that wasn't on any of the preseason All SEC teams, I could very easily see him being an All SEC guy by the end.
I think you guys have two really good picks there, and truthfully, the two first names that came to my mind. But I'll talk about a guy who I just mentioned a minute ago, and Edwin Spillman. And I know he's not going to be a starter or necessarily compete for one of those starting spots, but I think that if Edwin Spillman can just give you a really solid talent and somebody to be able to rotate in and keep, two fresh guys on the field, at a lot of the time, and what he can be able to do just to provide a really good third linebacker, I think that's another good pick. And then maybe just somebody who Shump, I think you talked about it a second ago, but somebody who I think could give Tennessee a boost if he can rise to the occasion, if he can step up to things, is an Idris Farouk or a Caleb Beasley out there with the safeties. And again, that's not, I guess maybe that one is less projecting that they will, but maybe more so projecting if they can, then I think that gives Tennessee's defense a huge boost. So I think you guys are right. If you give me guys who, if you give me names who I think, man, really started to show some things last year and who I believe could step into the fold, I think you're right. Tyree West, David Hobbs, those are really good names. Ricky Gibson becoming, without Jermod McCoy there for however long he might be out, if he can become that number one type cornerback, I think that's huge for Tennessee's defense. But if you're talking about guys who if they do take a step and if they can have some sort of breakout season, then Tennessee is just all the best for it. I think that Caleb Beasley and Idris Farouk, the way that we heard the coaches talk about them a little bit, and then, some of the reports that we heard about their off seasons, I think that would go a huge way and sort of boosting where this Tennessee defense can be. But again, we'll have to see how those things shake out over the next month.
I think Edwin Spillman's a good call. He's going to play a lot of football this year. You're right. He's not going to be a starter unless there's an injury, but there's been a lot of injuries in that linebacker room for Tennessee, so you can't rule it out. But I mean, think about how much Caleb Perry played last year. And that's someone that, he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great for Tennessee at linebacker. And he played a lot of football because they needed to rotate at least a third guy. I think they wanted really 4 or 5 guys to get in that rotation. So I think Edwin Spillman's going to play a lot of football. I think he could have maybe not a breakout in terms of, hey, let's get this guy on first-round mock drafts going into next season.
Right.
A breakout in terms of, this guy can play SEC football, and he's going to be a great piece for Tennessee going forward.
Yeah, he's emerging. He's somebody who, when he rotates into the game, it's not that big of a drop-off, which I think would be huge for the middle of that defense.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Rick. And I do think Williams wants to play a lot of guys. I think that much is clear. Like, that means he's going to play a lot. And again, I mean, I think it's telling. And it's kind of, is this more about Edwin Spillman, or is this more about the fact that William Minch wants to play a lot? I mean, Edwin Spillman missed so much time last year. He gets thrown back in. Really, his first game back was Vanderbilt. And he played a lot of snaps, or a good bit of snaps, for it to be a big game that Tennessee needed to win. I almost think like Spillman and Farouk are, I would almost say, similar, to the sense that I think they have high ceilings, like big. They have ability to make a lot of plays defensively, to where if they're out there and if they can be solid and consistent and everything else, like I think it's really exciting. Spillman's role is, to me, more solidified. The floor for him this season is much higher than it is for Farouk. But both of those are guys are, to me, high ceiling guys on defense that, if they are out there playing a lot, it probably bodes really well for Tennessee, because that means they have a lot of the simple things and a lot of the, kind of the main things that you have to be able to do to stay on the field. Tennessee feels good about them doing that. And if they feel good about them doing that, I feel good. Or I think they would certainly have the potential to do a lot of really high level things and raise the ceiling of the defense as a whole.
Yeah, I think so. I think those are good questions, though. And man, there's still plenty to talk about with this Tennessee fall camp and everything that is going to unfold starting on Wednesday morning as we record this here, sort of late Tuesday after media days are wrapped up and in the rear view. And now talking season is done with. And we are, well, I guess there'll still be a little bit of talking throughout fall camp here, but now we actually get to see it on the field. We talked a little bit about the offense. We talked a little bit about the defense. And even hit a few topics on the off-the-field story side of things, with obviously Boo Carter and everything going on around with his situation right now. But there were 2 topics that we didn't get a chance to get to here today within the hour-long podcast that we are doing. So I want to kind of save those for next week and give you a little bit of a tease. And that is directly related to both of my nice, great co-stars right here. 2 great articles that are out on RockyTopInsider.com. If you've made it this far on the show, I couldn't recommend enough going and checking those out right now. But number one, Ryan Sylvia put out an article of the top players that he's most excited for. Give me a little bit of clarification here. Was it on the fall camp slate, or was it coming up for the 2025 season as a whole?
It was the players that I am going to be keeping my closest eye on during fall camp, I think, is the way to phrase it. So who am I most interested to see what they're bringing to the table heading into the season?
Okay, so that is one thing that we're going to be talking about next week. I sort of want to dive into, Sylvia's thought process of writing that article and obviously why he got to each decision. I'm sure that will get us into plenty more conversation about some of the upcoming positional battles and things of that nature. But speaking of positional battles, we had mentioned it a little bit earlier on the show today, is that Ryan Shumpert put out his pre-fall camp depth chart projections. And I don't think you had any ors, which is a stark difference from what we will actually see during the regular season. So you had some stones about it, and you gave these guys actual slots. But something that I want to dive into next week, or maybe if we can even get to it later in the week as well, if things are going well and things are rolling, it's just maybe some of the toughest decisions you had while putting that whole thing together. Obviously, it takes a lot of time and energy and effort. And we very much think highly of what you do when you put those together. But I sort of want to dive into your thought decision process and some of those tougher battles. And again, just sort of lead us through more conversation and dialogue about this roster that it's unfolding. I mean, there's so many different things you could talk about, whether it be, for instance, a second ago, Sylvia, you just mentioned how Caleb Perry is a guy that we really haven't mentioned throughout this whole podcast, but he's a guy who's gotten those reps throughout his time at Tennessee. But on the offensive side of things, we're talking about players who really haven't had that experience. And so we're just sort of projecting what they're going to look like now with more increased high profile roles in what Tennessee wants to do this year. So I just think there's so many interesting things to get into here over the next 30 days or so leading into Tennessee's season opener against Syracuse. But those are two things that I definitely want to at least talk about next week is the guys that Sylvia has his eyes on, and then obviously Ryan's depth chart predictions and just sort of what were the tough decisions that went into some of those slots that he put out here on Tuesday.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to get into it and see, if any of my opinions have changed after 1 week of
Yeah,
spring
good point.
or fall practice.
No doubt about it. All right. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for us today. Obviously, it's been a long day here on Tuesday, but we are happy to be back in the saddle, happy to be getting things going again. Look, we've got a ton of UT Media Day coverage up on the site right now over at RockyTopInsider.com. But this is also a great time to go ahead and subscribe to the Rocky Top Insider YouTube channel. I believe that including whenever this video goes up, whether it be if it does go up on Tuesday, I believe that'll be the 14th video that we've posted today alone. That's three coaches talking and giving their full press conferences. That is 10 players. And then we also have a snippet up just specifically of what Josh Heupel said about the Boo Carter situation. Then this one right here, I believe, or I guess maybe that even makes 15. So 15 videos up right now on the Rocky Top Insider YouTube account as soon as you hear this or as you are watching it right now. A great time to go ahead and get subscribed to RTI on YouTube, but also a great time to go ahead and just get connected with us as we continue to bring you the best Tennessee news, notes, and coverage heading into the fall camp slate. That's at Rocky Top Insider on any social media platform you can find, as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. We're going to be coming in with a lot of content. We get to be on the field tomorrow during practice. We're going to have pictures and videos coming out of that one, and the same will be true for the rest of the month as well. But still plenty of conversation to get into, still plenty of fun to be had. And gentlemen, I cannot wait to do it with you guys over the next month. It should be a good one.
Yes, it should. Oma getting closer to being football time in Tennessee.
Right, getting close. I had to actually stop myself from writing that in an article the other day. Or maybe it was even today. I said it's football time in Tennessee with fall camp now here, but that's not necessarily the case. I think football time in Atlanta is going to happen in just over a month as Tennessee kicks off the regular season against Syracuse over in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That right there is Ryan Shumper. You can follow him on Twitter at rshump00. Above him is Ryan Sylvia. You can follow him at Ryan T. Sylvia as well. Give our friend Jack follow Foster. He is doing great things with us as well, just not on the podcast today. What?
Happy birthday, Jack Foster.
That's right. Happy birthday, Jack Foster. We're all on the same page about that. We're all getting it done with. Not one of us could have missed the birthday. It certainly wouldn't have been me, although it might have been me. Big happy birthday to our good friend Jack Foster, who is another year older, but not another year wiser. You can follow him at Jack Foster Media on Twitter. And if you want to follow myself, you can do that at Rick_Butler. But of course, just be staying in touch with Rocky Top Insider on all social media channels. And of course, at www.rockytopinsider.com throughout the fall camp as we get you ready for football time in Tennessee. Hey, thanks so much for listening today. We'll see you back for the next one to continue breaking down a little Tennessee fall camp coverage.